And the fact of the matter is that most of us, once we pass away, and once the people that actually knew us directly pass away, our names will be forgotten to history. And that's something that I think this generation of participation trophy kids can't come to grips with. So they throw tantrums like 3-year-olds, even though they're in their teens and 20s.
You call yourself a free spirit, a wild thing, and you're terrified somebody's going to stick you in a cage. Well, baby, you're already in that cage. You built it yourself.
Something's changed in your eyes. I could see it when I walked through that door.
Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Inspired by Fire. I am, of course, your host, Jalen Vasquez, and welcome to a brand new episode. I have a special guest on today. His name is Trevor Lane from mantoolsmedia.com, where he does a live stream show that he turns into a podcast with his co-host, Eric Madrid. And they're promoting strength, mastery, courage, and honor. Literally, first of all, when did these things become virtues of toxicity? These things seem to me to be something that everyone should strive for, not even just men, but obviously especially men. But it's hard to believe that at this point in time, there is this like invisible shame force or something that is cracking down on this. It's really hard to believe.
I think you're right. I think they're kind of twisting things up and referring to things. I don't know if you've read 1984, but we're getting into an age of double speak.
I have it right next to my bed right now. I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What they say is not what they mean. And we're expected to understand the double talk and buy into the groupthink.
Yeah. And this is sort of, in my opinion, this is the major problem with collectivist thinking in general. This country was founded on an individualist idea and philosophy, and pull your bootstraps up, hard work, self-ownership, and self-ownership and responsibility for the things that you do, consequences for your actions. And I'm in my 20s. It's not like, I remember the last guest you had on your show, you were talking about most people my age, and especially people a little bit younger, only remember the time since Obama's been the president. And then now you go from that, like you said, you have like some slick talking. I mean, he's a great politician as far as like talking goes and getting that kind of like presidential energy out there. But then, you get to the next person here, Trump, who says all the wrong things as far as presidents go. It's this new age. We're in the age of social media, and he just comes out swinging. And to these people, he's literally Hitler in their minds. And it's almost, I can't even imagine a scenario where this is reversed. Because if it goes the other way, you're going to have, it's always the most important election of all time, but I just can't see things going back to the way they were when I was a little bit younger. It seems like things are changing in more of a divisive negative, and that's unfortunate. And I'm not sure what it would take to get back to that. Do you see it going back? Are you confident that things can go in a more positive direction for the country as a whole?
That's a great question. I'm hopeful that it can, but I'm realistic and see that that may not be possible. What I worry though is I have to be very careful how I word this, because I do work for the federal government.
Okay.
So I'm not hoping that anything like this happens. I'm not encouraging this to happen, but I think what is going to happen is that you're going to see eventually the United States split up into a couple of like regional countries. And I just hope if and when that happens, that it's not bloody like it was the first time that someone tried that.
Well, absolutely. And this is something that I've been saying for a while now to, people around me in the circle that are involved in these kinds of, talks and these kind of podcasts or whatever is, secession really does, it really seems like the only possible solution in my mind to getting to a place of peace and peaceful free trade again and things like this. Because, yeah, I mean, obviously, when you turn on the TV, I mean, I don't know if there's ever been more of a, how do I want to say this? I mean, there's absolutely a culture war in that regard, especially when you look at social media and, turn on the TV and things like this. However, at the same time, I have also thought in my mind too, it's easy to see that and just think how negative and horrible things are. But, you go to the grocery store, you go, all these other places, and people are pretty much cordial with each other. No one's talking about politics or no one's cutting anyone in line for the most part. Everyone seems to be, cooperative in that sense still. Like I'm always like, it's much more fascinating to me and it blows me away way more how like cooperative we are in general as far as like even driving and shit like this. But if when you see what humans are capable of and how things have turned out in the past, I'm surprised that it's not absolute chaos all the time. However, I had separated myself from the news for the last like 2.5 weeks up until about a week ago. So there was a lot there. I mean, there was tons of stuff that happened even in that point alone. But in general, it does seem to me that's the case. You know what I mean? Things seem to be pretty peaceful out there in Colorado Springs where you're at, right? Or is it,
Yeah,
dicey
yeah,
like
for the
that?
most part. But the one thing that I will say that I think is causing maybe some more interpersonal um, conflicts to erupt are these mask mandates. If you choose to not wear a mask, it opens you for attack. And to be honest, vice versa. Some people are like, "Oh, you're wearing a mask, you big fucking pussy."
Right.
Uh, so it's a strange, and I don't know if that's an unintended consequence or if it's some weird deep conspiracy uh, to push something like that to a head. Um, but that seems to be the thing that's happening. Which, before the mask stuff, it was it really was people pretty much left each other alone. Um, you didn't have quite the incidents of Karens, as they're called in
Yeah.
pop culture. Um, and it seems to have painted, basically become a painted target on people. You can see immediately what side someone's on by whether or not they comply with the mask directive.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I was thinking today earlier when I was out. I cycle every day, so when I was out riding my bike, this is my thinking time, and it seems like for the last maybe even more than a couple weeks now that for the most part, at least, that from what I'm noticing, especially outside of the city, I'm in Denver. I'm in East Denver, and I go all over the place for work around the city here. But the farther away you get from the city, the more it seems like the mask is more of out of courtesy for the other person because you're just not sure whether
Right.
it's like appropriate or not, or whether they're going to be offended or not. But I
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
notice this change a bit, as of where before it was like just everyone's like just do it, don't ask any questions. Now there's a lot of that hanging halfway down the face shit with the nose
You're
sticking
right.
out, and it's like I'm always moving it up and down and to gauge whether the other person like accepts it or not. I don't know if you noticed that shift lately or not, or if you don't see that or whatever.
Well, it's strange too in Colorado. I think Denver is one of the few cities that's actually where the law enforcement is actually saying that they're going to enforce that mandate.
Really?
Down here in Colorado Springs Police Department said they will enforce trespassing. So if a business tells you you have to have a mask on and you say "fuck you, I'm coming in anyways," well, that's trespassing, and they're as they should. Once a business says they don't want you there, law enforcement should be on call to remove them. And the El Paso County Sheriff said they will not respond to any calls just of somebody not wearing a mask. And the El Paso County Sheriff actually used the words, "We will not erode public trust any further by trying to enforce something like that."
See, this brings up um, a a particular point in my mind, I guess, because I had this conversation with a friend the other day that before this whole thing started, or well, I'll just say this right now, that you hear this kind of thing come out of a lot of people's mouths that, oh, coronavirus ruined our economy. And to me, it's like, no, the government shut everything down and that ruined the economy. Before the mandated shutdowns, businesses were already going in the direction of social distancing, putting
Right.
plastic up, behind the registers.
Yep.
Sports ticket sales were way down. Like, it was already going out of direction before the mandate. It's not like, no, there's no evidence that suggests that for any, especially some arbitrary number of lives saved, there's no real mathematical way to calculate that. I find that completely absurd, but it was already going in that direction. And with that being said, I was also pointing out in that regard that, as far as private enterprise goes, if on private property, on a business, for example, if their rule is that, you're required to wear a mask to come in here, then that's their rule. I mean, I'm definitely not for imposing this on a state level to people. But if a business, like a private decision is made that you have to wear a mask because it was already going in that direction in any way, whatever, that's fine. That's up to them. And if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else, type of situation. So it's not, obviously it's very nuanced and things like that. But we're seeing it's been an incredible year as far as just like watching just watching what human psychology is like in times like this. I find it to be incredibly fascinating, despite all the negative, side effects of everything that's going on.
Yeah, it is. As I forget who said it first, but the quote that I often point to is, "We live in interesting times, and in certain ways, that's more exciting than living in good times."
Yeah, yes, I am familiar with that quote too. One that I was thinking of, I don't know if it's a quote, maybe more of like a parable or something. And I do think that this is prime time or I think it's obvious for which stage we are in that. But of course, the old, hard times create strong men, men create good times create, weak men, and then of course,
Yeah.
weak men create hard times. And I maybe you would agree, maybe you wouldn't. I'm sure you would, that we are, in the stage of weak weak men creating hard times. I think that's the direction that it's kind of going in.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I think that is kind of where we're at.
Unfortunately, but
Yep.
you know, think I've been back and forth with the whole, the pros and cons of the internet and social media lately. I've been thinking about this a lot, but it is good that we can have conversations like this and broadcast them out, to the public, to maybe play a kind of counterbalance to the corporate press, who is clearly under a progressive umbrella, if you will. I think all of it, not just CNN or NBC or whatever. I think the whole, I mean, all of it is in general under this progressivist umbrella that started, literally in the progressive era. That's kind of when this all shifted. But yeah, I mean, I really see what you're saying. And it's not even that I'm thinking about that right now. I've been talking about this for a long time, that secession really is going probably the way it looks right now. I know Texas has talked about it a lot. California's even talked about it a lot. And, it would be a great experiment to see, like with in a region or a place on this territory where, go ahead, go implement socialism, communism, and have complete central domination of an economy, and see how that works out. And I can guarantee you that it'll be the same thing, just like all of the other time that that's been tried, that people will be running across the border to a place where there's more liberty and freedom.
Yeah, I have no doubt. And on the idea of secession, I don't know that it even needs to necessarily be that. We kind of have a blueprint already, um, with marijuana legalization. Look at how many states have legalized marijuana. It's still illegal under the federal law, but as long as the feds don't enforce it, and that would need to be the approach, is just let the states do whatever they want. It's fine. And the Fed can almost turn into like a figurehead, or um, kind of I guess you'd call it like a referee figure, as opposed to an active player in the game.
But I don't know how that ever ends up working out successfully, because that
Well,
obviously was
people
the
people don't want to
idea
let
in the
go of.
beginning, and now you end up in a situation like you have right now with total,
Yeah,
basically the
people don't,
situation.
once they grab some kind of power, they don't want to let go of it. And it just so happens that you can see that they really don't give a shit about the marijuana thing, or they would go ahead and enforce it. I'm just saying that would kind of be the ideal, is states just start doing their own thing and the feds just don't really react. But I'm not sure that that's what would or could happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that obviously brings up the thought of, I believe on it was Breitbart that said that politics is downstream from culture, and that I
Yeah.
had a hard time wrapping my head around that one for a bit, but after thinking about it, I do think there is something to that. And in regards to the marijuana situation, we're both from Colorado. This was the first state, other than I think, I don't remember what the other state was. It was the first of two states, though, to legalize weed. But if you remember, at first, the feds did come in and they were doing these crazy raids on these dispensaries at first. But at a certain point, it's like, you see like these situations in dictatorships where it's like, if you have 50,000 people outside of the Capitol screaming, "We want policy X," the dictator is eventually going to be like, I was thinking about it, and we're going to implement policy X. It seems there. I do think there is something to politics being downstream from culture.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Well, again, using marijuana legalization as an example, um, look at how many people just smoked weed before it was legal. Um, the culture eventually influenced the politics because most of us didn't give a shit. You know, I I don't partake myself, but I have an attitude of why would I care if the next door neighbor smokes a joint? Um,
Yeah.
and
So
that seemed to take hold, and eventually the policy caught up.
yeah, absolutely. And it's just one of those things that, um, but as in regards to what's going on right now on the extreme end of, these, I mean, essentially Marxist revolutionary riots that are going on out in the streets, you have, these governors literally telling the police to stand down in a situation like this. And I'm like, as someone who is, yeah, I mean, the most libertarian person in any room that you'll ever be in, it's like, obviously, I see, from my perspective, all the problems with the state in regards to how they allocate resources, and, how private enterprise could always does things better in the situation. And I'm someone who thinks that private security is a much more viable option at this point. But with that being said, what's way worse than, maybe some misallocated resources or police not, always being the most efficient, is the fucking city burning down. And it's like,
Yeah,
if our tax dollars are going to pay for these things and the services that they're supposed to render, I mean, we would at least expect that money is being used in that regard. And when they're just being told to stand down while the fucking city burns down. It's like on CNN the other day, they were out there, and I think it was Portland, and there was literally a fucking fire behind the reporter, and
yeah.
the little headline was like, "Fiery but mostly peaceful
I
protests."
saw
It's like,
that.
what is going on right now?
Yeah, and Portland is a great example of well, I'm not sure if it's a failure in leadership or if this is the plan. Um, the mayor there, obviously a huge leftist, to the point where he's actually encouraging these riots. Um, and then, uh, unlike some other places where once it hit home, like I think the mayor of Seattle, once the Chaz people like started rioting near her neighborhood, that's when the bulldozers came out and finally got rid of them. But in Portland, I guess he just lives in like uh, a very high end like condo complex, and the rioters started um, trying to set that building on fire with the residents still inside, and knew that it was his place. They were targeting, I guess, him, and he is still on their side to the point where he just sent a letter out to every other resident saying, well, I'm going to move so that this doesn't happen to you again. Not, I'm going to stop the rioting.
Like
and
it's what's
and
going.
let
I
the
mean, it's
police do their
quite
job.
literally such. It's so psychotic that it's. I mean, it's literally just even hard to wrap your head around. I mean, at the DNC convention, they made no mention of of the riots whatsoever. None. Not one lick of the. I don't even. They're not even. I don't even call them protests anymore. They're not. It's not protesting when you're burning shit down, breaking windows, beating people over the head with bricks. I mean, this is fucking barbaric behavior, and I can't believe that the second that okay. So last episode, for example, but by the when I was recording that, I had no idea about the Kenosha situation,
Mm-hmm.
and after becoming familiar with it, kind of seeing what was going on, I mean, it's it's crazy how unfortunately, it's going to be a political, a politicized prosecution. And, it's I guess that goes back to my last point that if like there's not going to be law enforcement or some kind of order in a situation like this, there are going to be private citizens that are like, well, all right, well, if no one else is going to do anything about it, I guess I am. I do think it was probably, I mean, that was fucking dumb, to be like, I'm going to go and like, you know, try to, just on an individual level, it does seem like a silly thing to decide to do. But if you watch what's going on, if you know anything about, how to handle a gun, I did like a 2 week thing in Vegas, all the gun classes, how to clear a room, how to do all that stuff. I mean, you watch it. I mean, really, I mean, impressive for a 17-year-old to be able to have hand himself like that. It seems like most fucking cops can't even, look at, do it that way. And,
Yeah.
as far as the way everything went down, I mean, eventually violence is going to be met with violence. And that is not what most people want to hear. I'm going to get a lot of shit for that. I can already hear it and see the emails now, but it's just one of these things where, what do you fucking expect? I mean, at what point is this going to register in people's minds that that people are fed up with this? I think.
Well, and that's the question I have for people that particularly with the I forget the gentleman's name, Blake in
Kyle, I think.
Kenosha. Well, Kyle was the young kid that came out there and defended himself with his AR-15.
Right.
I'm talking about the initial guy they were trying to arrest.
Oh, right. So
Um,
there was the one in the beginning where there was like it was the footage came in to a point where you're like, okay, well, there's really no way to know exactly what was going on before then. But and then as it continued to when they were running down the street, they were clearly throwing something. There was, clearly it seemed like he was felt like
well, no,
his
no, no.
life was threatened.
I was talking about the guy that got shot by the police.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
I was going
Anyway,
back to
sorry.
that, the initial thing that kicked it all off. Um, you can argue about, well, he was shot in the back. Was he reaching into the car? Was he doing this? Was he doing that? Um, the and what I think the people fail to get into, or I guess on the Black Lives Matter side, try to gloss over and ignore is what do they expect to happen when the police show up? They were called there specifically because this guy was around. Um, I don't know if they were called because he had a warrant or found out that he had a warrant out once they got there. But once they found out that he had a warrant, they have to arrest him. That's what that means. He had a
Right,
warrant for his arrest out. Um, so what is their expectation that as soon as you say no, I'm not coming with you, that the police just go, okay, well, have a nice day.
right.
Um, that seems to be what their end game is that's what they want. They either want the police not to exist, or if they do, that they don't have any arrest powers or won't exercise those powers for the sake of not offending anybody, which is, it sounds dangerous and stupid to me.
It does. And I forget which governor it was, but I remember seeing the clip on YouTube of, you know, I mean, you got it. I mean, I guess to some degree, when you move to particular cities with, a particularly dominant, let's just say, like, I mean, literally these Democratic run states are all the most horrific as far as like gun violence goes. Anywhere where there's like the
Yeah.
most gun laws, the most gun violence exists. It's so funny how that doesn't. That's another thing that doesn't register a lot. But it was like, well, as far as defunding the police situation goes, uh, I guess if you call and they don't come, I guess you'll understand what it's like to be a black person who's oppressed or something like this. I was like, wow, that is quite the. She's got quite the beak on her. I forgot the name of the governor, but I was very shocked when I seen stuff like
Yeah.
that. So it's just
I
hard
kind
to
of
believe where it's going.
I kind of remember that. She said something like, "Well, calling the police and having them show up is an example of white privilege."
Yeah, yep, that's what it was.
It's like,
It's
what?
wow. Okay. So we got an interesting situation that's going on, and the funny thing is it's like none of these people even have an idea of really what they mean when they say defund the police. It's the worst slogan of all time. If you ask
Yeah.
someone like me, or the kind of people I guess that have that uh, have the more free market mindset and see how voluntary capitalism works, is like, well, okay, well, there's alternative ways of looking at different ways of security, et cetera, et cetera. But these people don't even have a real explanation of what it even means or what it entails. So it's just it's so inconsistent. The logic is out the window, and I think I just more than ever want to bring some kind of balance to that somehow, some way. And it's that's why I thought you'd be a great person to talk to about this, because I know someone like you, or in this situations like this, with what you're doing on mantles, goes way against the grain nowadays. And yeah, it's not the most popular thing to be a man in general these days, is it?
No, no. In fact, I forget where I was reading it, but there's a. I only saw the headline, so I don't even know if the article actually says this, and I didn't click on it, so I didn't buy the bait quite. But um, it said something about teachers and professors being encouraged to dislike a certain race and gender in particular, and I kind of went, "Huh, I wonder, I wonder which ones they're talking about."
Yeah.
Um, my presumption is that they mean white males. Um, the race thing isn't the hill that we've chosen to die on, but that doesn't mean that I don't recognize that there's some, you know, all these social movements are kind of a pendulum, right? Um, and they're swinging back the other way, um, and they haven't gotten to a point, at least with the men's issues, um, where we're actually passing anti-male laws yet. But I can see it getting there. Um, it's not a far leap from things like saying, California now requires that 50% of a board of directors in a company that's founded there. Um, I believe if the board is over 5 people, so like a 2-person LLC, this doesn't count for, but a larger company, their board of directors has to be at least 50% female, which is okay. Why can't they just hire the best people, regardless of their sex? Um, and I think it points to how government, when they try to create uh, equalities of outcome, as Jordan Peterson says all the time, their only way to do that is to hold whoever they think is getting ahead back. They can't actually promote the people that they think are falling behind. Um, and they haven't come out and said that that's what they want to do quite yet. I mean, officially, there obviously are, social movements that want that. Um, but I think the pendulum is starting to swing that way, which is why I think it's an important time for our show to exist, and to get our message out.
Yeah, it definitely is going in that direction. I mean, without a doubt, in my mind. Especially when everyone sees that long list of questionnaires before you finish off a job application of what race are you, what
Yeah,
gender are you, this and that. And because now businesses are incentivized to do things a certain way because they have to comply, and it's not the best person for the job anymore. It's we gotta it's a race and gender quota, which, I mean, inherently causes division on a conscious and subconscious level. This isn't like, and I'm not one of these ones who comes from the angle of, masculinity needs to be flipped around. I mean, the two things are, they're yin and yang. There's a balance between femininity and masculinity,
Right.
and we have our roles in, and I don't want to say roles, but there's a good balance to that when things work out, and there's plenty of examples of in society where you can see this. But of course, this isn't in Hollywood or anything like that. But the whole leftist Marxist agenda is, I mean, specifically says to rid of the nuclear family,
Yeah.
and that is, I mean, that's the entire thing is I mean, essentially based on that. And as far as the hatred, I mean, the like this fuck America with no perspective at all. It's hard to get, but like I see the flaws and I talk about a lot of the flaws, and someone like me almost sounds like a glass half empty negative situation like that. But I absolutely recognize the the lottery that we hit by living here in a situation like that, where we have the, I mean, freedom to talk about stuff like this right now, because there's still places in the world where that's not even a possibility. But
Oh
the
yeah,
blanket
absolutely.
fuck this with no perspective is insane, because I travel all over the world. I've been to every continent except Europe and Antarctica. So it's not, you see patterns in human behavior, and you see how things work in America. I mean, we're like, the most inclusive place of all time right now. It's not as far as like welcoming diversity, accepting people for who they are and all that stuff. So it's like this bash this with no perspective, as if it's like the worst place in the world to be. It's not something I can get behind, even though, like my rhetoric with, like, just wanting the state to stay out of the economy and all, banking, everything, like, it doesn't tie into that, and it is confusing. And the kind of logic that I want to, speak of and talk about, it's not a popular one. It's not one that's a viral thing that most people are going to, like. It takes a certain mindset to be able to be receptive to logic these days. And I'm not even saying I'm the most logical person, but it's becoming more and more rare for people to be able to think rationally as opposed to emotionally. So the emotional side of everything is really what's taking over, and that is probably where I think the over feminized, completely pussified society is, coming from. And I believe that that's a huge thing that ties into the stuff that we're seeing today.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty much every video that I see of, especially these Antifa people, the Black Lives Matter not as much, but they seem to be kind of waning in their fervor when it comes to these riots. Like I think, like Pat Dixon, our guest last night, said, they've stolen all the shoes they need, so they're kind of not really showing up. So you're really just left with these pasty white, skinny soy boy Antifa types. That one, a self-proclaimed Antifa commander, I guess, just got arrested, and the report kind of cracked me up. It said once he started getting the cuffs put on him, he started crying like a little baby. Um, and I think it's indicative of a couple of things. Not that I don't necessarily think that you have to hit kids to make them behave and turn out all right, but I think they have to know that their parents are willing to cross that line if they push them. And that generation that most of these kids are coming from, well, you can see it because when they get hit, they act like a person who's never been hit. Um,
100%.
um, so you can see that corporal punishment was never even something that they were fearful of or worried might happen. And like I said, I'm not saying that you have to spank your kids to 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 keep them in line, but um, I think the kids have to kind of, you play as a parent, you play all these psychological games. I think the kids have to realize that at least one of the parents and it could at some point flip that switch. Um, and it makes them kind of act right. The other thing is this is the generation, and it started with my generation really. I remember getting participation trophies. I remember playing football in it was like the community league, and because it was the community league, it wasn't a competitive league. We we had winners and losers at least back then as far as the teams, but at the end of the year, everyone did get a trophy. If you were hot shit, you got a nicer one. But even the guy that there, no one rode the bench because everyone had to play because it was a community thing. Um, but everyone got something, um, and I think we've kind of pushed that to the extreme where now everyone, regardless of what they've done, thinks that they're special and gonna leave some kind of neat little mark on the world. And the fact of the matter is that most of us, once we pass away, and once the people that actually knew us directly pass away, our names will be forgotten to history. And that's something that I think this generation of participation trophy kids can't come to grips with. So they throw tantrums like 3-year-olds, even though they're in their teens and 20s.
It's almost laughable. I mean, not almost. It's beyond laughable in regards to the everyone is a winner culture that you speak of. When I was living in Southeast Asia before coming back here because of the coronavirus in Hanoi and Vietnam, and you see, uh, you know, these like 80-year-old ladies walking around with these these long sticks that have two baskets hanging off each end full of fruits, veg, whatever, just kicking fucking ass, and they're smiling, they're happy. It's not what you would think, like, oh, this poor poverty crazy. I mean, they're rocking around still, they're participating in everything, going upstairs to sell this shit. I mean literally like 15-year-old kids, driving their motorcycle with their sister to the store to get groceries to then bring back to the to the shop for so their mom can keep making food for people. You just, when you see these kinds of things, and then I come back here and like, not to say that there isn't problems over there too, that absolutely just like anywhere, but like to see stuff like that and be around that kind of energy and camaraderie, and then come back here and talk to people my age. I'm 25, and see how the general attitude is. It's beyond laughable, and I can quite literally feel the entitlement in the air, and it's just something that it's cringy as fuck. And I have a hard time being sympathetic to this mentality in regards to victimhood and things along these lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I read something. I'm not sure how long ago, and I don't remember who wrote it, but it disturbed me at first until I got into kind of the meat of what they were getting at, and it was kind of saying how horrible Mister Rogers was. And at first, you're like, how could Mister Rogers be horrible? He's amazing. He was amazing. Um, but it goes into how destructive the idea that everyone is special. Um, and he points to it was just kind of lazy and choosing the word, possibly because Mr. Rogers was looking at little kids and needed to pick a word that they could understand. But what he really meant was you're unique. Yeah, you're one of a kind. That doesn't mean you're important to the grand scheme of things. And it drilled into everyone's head, oh, I'm special just by being alive. And that's, um, of course, to your parents, you should be special. Of course, to your family, you should be special. But to the world at large, that's simply not possible or practical for all of us to think that you're somehow important.
It's funny. What is it? Ryan Hoover from Skill Set Mags. He makes a great point, like in regards to like the too much masculine influence by. I mean, pointing out that less than 20% of males make up for school teachers. I mean, also as well as the fact that I don't know if you touched on this earlier, but that single mother homes are at an astronomical all-time high, even compared to 40 years ago. Now,
Oh
there
yeah.
is, I mean, this is a network, this is a domino effect, and all these things I think are kind of tied into each other. And in regards to that, in regards to everyone's winner culture, to into what you're saying, and yeah, I mean, it's just I don't know how that can shift for the better because, like you were saying, the formative years are especially important. And, the generation that we have now, the one like, the people my age and a little bit older, is millennials that are going into politics that are, I mean, obviously the far far left is who's running the universities and setting the curriculums and molding the minds of the youth, and I can only ponder what that's going to look like in 20 years from now when that mentality is when one of these super old fucks are gone from the Supreme Court, and it's like these people are the ones that, and I don't know what that's going to look like, or if it even is going to be remotely close to what it is right now. What are your kind of thoughts on the future, like 20, 30 years from now?
Well, it yeah, academia already disturbs me, and I only see it getting worse. So,
Yeah.
one thing that I've made a point to do is I am not saving money for my kids to go to college. Um, if that's something that they choose to do, um, they're going to be on their own, and I will advise them highly and heavily to not get a student loan to make that happen.
Right.
That they should, work your ass off, get enough money to pay the tuition outright, and if you have to, the way it used to be was you would work all summer to pay for the next year's tuition.
Right.
Um, that's how kind of the generation moving from the baby boomers, you know, into like their first generation of children. Um, that's how they did it. Was you just worked, um, and so I mean that's obviously that's a I guess small step that I'm taking just on my own, but I hopefully um, more people will have that kind of mindset. The other thing that I'm, that it sounds harsh, but maybe may end up um, making something like that better, as long as socialists don't make it into, well, it's a right, so that means that you get it for free, which, they don't know what a right means then,
Right.
because under the Second Amendment, I should just be issued a gun if rights mean that you get whatever that thing is for free. Um,
Yeah, and that's a
uh,
good point.
but um, if student loans continue to spiral out of control and fuck up people's credit, hopefully kids will see, yeah, maybe college isn't a great idea. Maybe I'll do a trade school. Maybe I'll um, just work for a couple of years after getting out of high school. Um, and that's what I'm hoping is something like that. Um, I view academia now not so much as an education, but kind of a really an indoctrination, and it's not good, and it becomes worse and worse the less that kids have to work um, towards paying for it. The more that it's just handed to them. Again, it's yet another thing that they just think they're entitled to. I am entitled to a fucking bachelor's degree. Well, you know what happens when everyone has a bachelor's degree? It becomes the
Worthless.
same. It becomes the same as a high school diploma.
Yeah.
Everyone's got one. Great. You expect to get a job with that? It's going to push it so that you have to have a master's degree will become the new bachelor's degree, and I guess a PhD will become the new master's degree, and they'll have to come up with something else that's the new doctorate.
Yeah. No, I mean fair enough. I can definitely see where you're coming from that. And I guess my thoughts to that would be I I think I'm more on the optimistic side of what you're saying, referring to the fact that there is a lot more people that are seeing that college really, it's not like it was 40 years ago, where it's definitely not as valuable to have that now, let alone to when it gets to the point like what you're talking about, when everyone has one because it's all free. But you know like you do a podcast, you're on the internet, you kind of see what's going on, I'm sure you do, and there are plenty of ways and an infinite amount of ways to make money online and start your own business. It's never been easier, it's never been cheaper, and there is a huge movement behind that. There's a lot of people getting into this and realizing that providing value and things like this comes with a lot of major benefits. And people that are doing shady shit, uh, virtually all the time, never have a long shelf life in this space. And there are more and more people that are able to find things that are or able to make businesses out of they're interested in. And I forget the fella's name. He's a tech investor. I'll have to remember his name and like link it in the show notes or something. But he very clearly shows how everyone can be wealthy in a gig like economy, which is where I think would be the best possible scenario for how things can work out like that. But he shows how there's an infinite amount of people, things that people are interested, and there's an infinite amount of possibilities as far as like being able to turn that into some kind of monetized business online. And hopefully things in that regard move in that direction. Of course, as far as you know you know some of the younger people that I talk to, when they're interested in that, like high school kids, as far as like, I don't know, there's also a lot of drawbacks to like Instagram influencing and things like that. There's a lot of fake bullshit that comes in
Sure.
those areas, of course. So obviously it's a huge spectrum, but the possibilities are virtually endless at this point. And I can only hope that as technology evolves and advances, that this maybe decentralizes things in regards to what we're talking about in academia and things like this, and it can be much more of a individualized thing and personalized thing, as opposed to getting a fucking gender studies degree or something like this and then proceeding from there.
Well, yeah, I think some of that is starting. I mean, that's kind of what Khan Academy is doing, is pay for classes a la carte. At least when
Yeah.
it comes to the higher learning. And my daughter this year, from what I understand, it was whatever we were doing. I think it was because she's um, still in like middle school. It was free, but I used Khan Academy basically as a tutor to bring her math grade up from a D, which is what she finished with last year, and right now she's still holding on to a solid B. Um,
Right
so
on.
um, I think things like that, you're going to see more and more of that. Of course, the people that would argue against that is, well, if it's not part of the academia system, you can't trust that they're giving good information. Well, you can't trust the academia system that they're giving good information anymore. Um, the fact that even when I went to college, which was, gosh, like 2004, so we're talking like 15 years ago, they were already pushing, um, at least as a theory, and I think now they're basically saying that it's a fact. Things like race is a social construct; it's not biological, and it's like, no, like a CSI investigator can do a blood swab and know the race of the person that left that blood.
Yeah.
That is biological. That is not
I
a
I
social
I
thing.
cannot get pregnant. I mean, like that just it, that,
Well, and yeah, on that point, going back to the whole favoring people in jobs, how can you favor certain races and genders when we can all just be whatever we want? I mean, if I was looking for a job now, I would put myself down as a black female, and then when I walked in to the interview, and they said, wait a minute, I'd be
Surprise,
like, I
surprise,
identify as a
motherfuckers.
black female. You need to treat me like that. And I would push that.
Yeah, it's like this. I mean, I don't know if you think it's retarded or not, but South Park usually nails this shit. But they had that episode where the just big strong bodybuilder, is like,
Yeah.
I'm a woman
Yeah.
and I'm fucking just shatter all the records and just beat the
Yeah.
shit out
And
of all these chicks.
it was just Macho Man Randy Savage
Yeah,
in a dress.
yeah, Randy Savage. Yeah, that's right. That shit was hilarious. But they nail it on the head with something like that, and I believe that that's even happening in real life. I think in New Zealand there was a dude who's like, I'm a chick and I identify as a woman, and I'm going to do the women's bodybuilding competition and shit. It's
Yep.
just it's
Yeah.
that level of trolling is like fucking
Oh,
awesome. I think that's
we've
hilarious,
looked
and it
at,
draws a good point.
but there is a victim there that I think it starts getting overlooked. A lot of people kind of go, well, who does it hurt? Well, the people that it hurts are the natural females who got really
Exactly.
good at a sport and are now looking at that as a way into college because, again, we push college on everybody. And they're going, man, I could get a track scholarship, until a dude in, a mini skirt and pigtails shows up and, blows past them in the mile. And then their scholarship is fucked because this guy is saying, I'm a girl, and beating hitting getting on the podium every time, so there is a victim there is damage. These are people that, we're counting on this for their future. We're, training their asses off, and training can only take you so far. Someone that has spent 15 years, talking about high school kids, 15 years with male testosterone flowing through their body, is just built differently, even if you cut their dick off.
As
That's all
serious
there
as
is
the
to it.
decision as that is, it still rings true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that brings up a good point to the fact that um, the amazing like the in regards to like real womanhood, all like it's almost like they're taking that away from real women, the women that
Yeah.
do want to care for their children, that do care about making sure things, I mean, it's an incredibly important part of raising a good family and being just like good citizens, I guess, or anything. Like the women have an incredible role in that regard, and this super gnarly feminism, or this push for this crazy uber feminism is taking that away, and it's unfortunate to see. And again, it's this invisible, I call it the invisible shame force, and it makes it impossible for these other gals to speak out. And it's the same thing with like, that we live in a rape culture and all these constant this me tooing, this cancel thing. It takes away from people who are really going through some shit like that, when everyone willy-nilly is just saying, oh yep, I was raped because I got drunk with someone and we had sex.
Yeah. Or, well, yeah, the whole I regret it now, so it's rape.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
wild.
give me a break. And I even found kind of dubious. I grew up in the generation when they first started talking about the idea of date rape. I found that a little dubious. Now, not so much. I mean, I would tend to agree that if a if a lady can't specifically say, yes, I want to fuck you, you probably shouldn't be fucking her.
Yeah. Right. And another funny ass scene too. I got to bring up that because, of course, I just think South Park nails it. But when the PC principal is like, "Gentlemen, consent forms. Hey, did you perform condolingus last night? I need another consent form." But like, it's just another thing that I thought of too, where it's like, yeah, it's crazy that it's like that direction. That's not good.
Yeah, it's it's fucking bananas.
It is.
And it got
Yeah.
to the point where, I mean, it was a joke, but for a minute, but I think some colleges actually started putting out sex contracts that had to be signed by
Yeah.
both parties. Which,
Yeah, it's
Isn't that romantic? Here, sign this. Hang on, I got to
Unbelievably.
get it notarized, and my lawyer has to look it over. You know?
Just be like, all right, we good? We good? Oh, okay. Yeah, no. Hey, that is about up at an hour. Now you got to go here. Trevor, why don't you go ahead and let people know where they can find you? Plug your stuff, brother.
All right. Well, mantoolsmedia.com is the website. You can definitely find everything there. We are on all of the social media that you can think of. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're even on like Minds and Parlor. Um, and all of those are at Man Tools Media. We try to keep the brand nice and simple and clean. So basically, anywhere on the internet, if you put in Man Tools Media, you're gonna find us. And we do a live stream every Thursday, 7:30 Mountain Time. Your listeners will just have to do the math and figure out what that means for their time zone.
Yeah, hopefully they can figure that out.
Uh, and yeah, it streams on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel, and on our Twitter. It also streams on Twitch, although no one ever watches it. So I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to that. But if you're into Twitch, we're there too. Yeah, and then it gets released as an audio podcast the next day, and that's on all of the podcast platforms. So yeah, if you type in Man Tools Media, you will find us and find out what we're about and how to listen or watch us.
Awesome, Trevor. Well, I appreciate the hang. I enjoyed it a lot, and yeah, I will link to all those things in the show notes and on the description for iTunes and all that. So you'll be able to find that there as well. Other than that, man, I hope you have a good rest of your day doing whatever you're doing, and yeah, we'll have to keep in touch.
Yeah, you too, man. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. See you later.
All right, bye.